Welcome to part 2 of the infamous art/artist Iceberg. If you haven't seen part 1, you should go watch it so you're caught up to speed. First, I want to thank everyone for the support and views I've gotten recently on the channel. It really means a lot. Second, it seems like a lot of people were confused by the placement of these entries and the way I formatted the iceberg. To the best of my knowledge and ability, I formatted the chart based on popularity and fame. You know, like how these types of videos usually go. It's not sorted by how bad the art or artist is on a moral scale. In fact, this is actually mentioned within the first 15 seconds of part 1. This chart is going to go through some of the most well-known to least known entries. Some of these are more mild and tame, while others are a confusing mess of horrible decisions created by horrible people who will also be mentioned. I obviously have my opinions, but these entries were chosen based on the general consensus of being infamous and/or controversial. Although, when it comes to the debate of who's more well-known than someone else, that's when it becomes subjective. I have my own reasons and justifications for who and what I put where, but I understand there's some disagreement. That's totally fine actually. If you think someone deserves to be higher or lower in the iceberg, let me know why. Now that that's out of the way, let's start the video. MaxDesignPro is a children's animator from Belarus with over 10 million subscribers on YouTube. His claim to fame comes from a series involving a family of monkeys and funny and relatable human situations. Some of the named characters include Max, Hope, Jimmy, Evil Max, and Nugget. Yes, there is lore to these animations. Sometimes there's full animations dedicated to just lore as well. His channel was created in 2020, although it seems like a lot of his old videos were removed, as the oldest upload on his channel is from 2022. So far this seems pretty innocent, right? Well, yeah, for the most part it is. Although a lot of criticism comes along Max's way due to the very nature of slop content aimed at children. A lot of people, especially parents, are very concerned with YouTube Kids content and what exactly they're watching and learning. It's been a problem for a while, especially with the ElsaGate situation a few years back. The meta changes every few years to see who can grab the most attention the longest. Let's be honest here, MaxDesignPro's animations do fall into the category of brain rot slop, with wacky sound effects and all that every second to keep the 6-year-old iPad kid's attention before they move on to something else. Every short begs the viewer to click on the like button and subscribe, or else the nugget dies or something. I can see how people think it's a little predatory towards kids' attention. I gotta be honest though, I don't really think this is the worst thing a kid could be watching. Is it stupid and confusing? Yeah. But I'm a grown man. Of course I wouldn't understand what the kids are into nowadays. From what I've seen though, it's extremely tame and doesn't try to inject weird fetishes or sexualization into the videos, so that's a relief at least. What did surprise me though, is that Max has a huge fan base of teenagers and young adults who seem to unironically love this series meant for toddlers. There's hundreds of pieces of fan art, accounts dedicated to certain characters, layers of drama from within. It's absolute insanity. I don't know how or why it's a thing, but it's not my business, so I'm just gonna drop it. I think this actually might be one of the most tame things on the iceberg, so good for him. ChippleDipple, otherwise known as Fractal County, is an artist, developer, and animator whose reputation has fallen into the gutter because of misinformation, trolling, and pissing off the wrong people. Chip's initial start came from animations he did on his YouTube channel, which went viral and propelled him into the limelight of internet fame. One of them was Carl the Brain Cell, made in 2018, which was an animated Oni Plays bit and where I initially found him. In November of 2019, Chip, Wilbur Soot, and Josh820 would create SMP Earth, inspired by SMP Live created by Call Me Carson. SMP Earth would actually continue until April of 2020. Now, given the nature of Minecraft YouTuber fans, things got crazy really quickly. The mega fans, also known as stans, of YouTubers like Dream and George Not Found as examples, would be parasocially obsessed with these people and worship them almost as if they were gods. This isn't too dissimilar to crazy obsessed fans of celebrities like Taylor Swift and most K-pop groups. Because of his association with these YouTubers, all eyes were now on Chip, who is a co-founder. Long story short, Chip's posting habits on Twitter pissed off a lot of these stans. However, the posts in question were either really obvious jokes or mild trolling. He'd be bombarded with hate messages and death threats for anything he posted. However, Chip's attitude towards this was very different than most. The average person would stop posting what they wanted and succumb to the hate mob attacking them. Chip took a different approach, however. He doubled down and keep posting what he felt like. Sometimes it'd be comics about things he thought were annoying, sometimes mocking people for being dumb, or just making people mad on purpose because to him it was funny. Hey, remember John Bob from last video? Well, he also included Chip in some animations before the allegations, without permission of course, but it was good for growth so he let it slide, as did many other creators. About a year after the allegations hit, Chip would make a very obviously satirical fan cam of John Bob, which burned a lot of bridges with any major supporters he might have had. Not many people would want to associate with him after this, causing his circle to grow smaller. At this point, Chip was running out of allies to actually vouch or support him if something serious did happen. And something did actually happen. It turns out on multiple occasions, some anonymous accounts posed as Chip's fans and sent horrible images of gore and NSFW to people, pretending like they were sent by him to harass his detractors. The accounts mostly admitted to being neutral parties that wanted to cause chaos for fun, but a lot of people didn't believe this and thought Chip had sent them. The next incident would involve poop. Stay with me. Someone who talked to Chip would make a post calling him out for sending them images of his poop, claiming that he legitimately took a shit in his own hands and then took a picture. The image being of Chip's own poop and being taken by him were false, as it was connected to a now deleted account who actually did do that. However, yes, Chip did send a picture of poop, not his own poop mind you, to this person. What makes it worse is that this person was 17 going on 18 in a few weeks. Why did he do this? According to him, he thought the person was annoying and thought it was funny. I'm gonna be honest, probably not the best idea to send poop photos to people, especially when you don't know them that well, but f*** it, what do I know? Now, while this in my eyes and many other people's eyes was a shitty, thing to do, others went as far as to call it a sex crime against a minor. Now we enter the Pipka arc of this segment, where Chip posted a meme including the artist Pipka, causing them to respond saying that they don't want anything to do with him. This would culminate into Chip and his fans making Pipka Gassy edits, alongside the character Incredible Gassy, and his own character Sergeant Braphog. Jesus f***ing Christ, what am I reading? There was also the Pipka game that Chip would create, which was a platformer involving their character becoming morbidly obese and fighting pre-diet Nikocado avocado. Pipka and Chip's beef would last for a while, where Chip would make fun of them, Pipka would always retaliate, Chip finds it funny, and repeat. This caused a vicious cycle of mockery with hundreds of tweets throughout a few months. The launch website for the Pipka game would go live in March of 2023. However, something was wrong. It turns out Chip fucked up and a lot of personal information, including his real name, address, and phone number, were found in the source code. Chip would then get doxxed and have dozens of people call his personal phone. Except not really. Turns out the whole thing was a huge stunt and totally fabricated. All the information was fake and the phone number was a burner recording all the messages sent. These would be placed into the game as voice lines, and the stunt was created to weed out all the people who celebrated or posted the doxing. After all this, Chip made a document debunking all the claims made against him, like the poop, stalking, harassment, and pedo allegations. Although most people who hated him didn't care, their minds were made up. In fact, not long after, Chip would get doxed for real this time. The doxers going as far as to contact his family. Fearing for his own safety, he deactivated his account temporarily. Chip has been back for a while now, and from what I've seen, he hasn't got into any major drama since the Pipka arc. Although in September, there was that time he changed his name and profile picture to Smart Schoolboy 9 as a joke, which people didn't like. Funnily enough, because Twitter is Twitter, he couldn't change his profile picture back and was stuck as Smart Schoolboy 9 for a while. He's been working on developing some games for the most part and stayed out of major trouble since the actual doxing happened. He still posts what he feels like, but most have either blocked him or don't care anymore. Probably the best, since becoming public enemy #1 on Twitter is always a bad idea, just like what happened to Stone Toss. Obviously, despite posting a lot of rage bait and making fun of people who may or may not have deserved it, I don't condone doxing and it definitely should not have happened. Most of the information was gathered from this Turkey Tom video, by the way, so if you want details and a more thorough analysis, then go watch that. At the very least though, when Chip saw the previous video I made, he at least understood how an iceberg chart worked, unlike the next guy we're going to be talking about. Anton Severtnik, otherwise known as Antoons, is an Estonian animator and comic artist with over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Anton started his online career around 2014, but he's been drawing ever since he was a kid. Side note, by the way, his lore is actually really insane from what I'm reading. Dude was kidnapped by his dad when he was 3 and lived in West Ukraine, until his mom tracked him down with the police and took custody of him. There's a lot more about his childhood and past before YouTube you could have read on his blog made in 2015, although it seems like this was taken down, so use the Wikitubia page about him instead. To summarize, Anton was a bit of a huge loner in high school and middle school, struggling with grades and only finding solace in art and video games for a while. It's actually kind of sad to see how much he struggled in his youth. On YouTube, he's most well known for his Deathbed series that imagines cartoon characters hypothetically living out their last day, usually a metaphor for that franchise dying. The series has been going on since 2017 and is immensely popular, garnering hundreds of millions of views per video. The popularity of this series and many others would launch his career as a successful animator for most of the 2010s. However, in 2020, Daft Pina, everybody's favorite critic, made a video about Anton, calling him out for his tracing and some animations he did. The tracing was done without permission and mostly went uncredited. His response was that the tracing was okay because other people do it as well, according to him. Also arguing that what he did was transformative, adding his own style and flair over the traced frames of animation.
The example of what I used, the one that got most attention, was an image of a certain comic creator on the blue pilled side. I traced that as the base for the model in the mock-up trailer, but after that all the animation bits, like his attacks, were original. The only reason I traced one image was to make sure their representation looked recognizable, and once I got it down, I made the rest of the work from scratch.
Now, is tracing the end-all be-all for someone? Not really. It's pretty taboo in the art community, although it can be used as a learning tool for your own growth, as long as you're not claiming a traced image as your own work. Still, not a good thing to do in general, because it is stealing from others. Next, we move on to all the Twitter drama he had with his comics and Puppychan. Anton in 2020 would make highly offensive and edgy comics to get a rise out of people. He pretty much became a diet version of Stone Toss with jokes that aren't even original and lack any sort of punchline or comedy that Stone Toss has. Suffice to say, people did not like these comics and criticized him heavily for this. This leads into his beef with Puppychan, which lasted for a while. Long story short, Puppychan and Anton had a public argument about the concept of being transgender and about autism. This was a very long battle of tweets, DMs, comics, and harassment from fans on both sides, which culminated into Anton putting Puppychan's character into a game he was working on, where their special attack was spurting period blood from their crotch. Keep in mind, Puppychan was 17 at the time, which made this look incredibly bad for his side. And before anyone says anything, I will get to Puppychan and all the things they did later. This is just about Anton for now. After being confronted, Anton and Puppychan had a private talk in DMs and decided to squash the beef and let the drama finally end. Except not really. Leaked DMs on Discord show Anton claiming this was a non-aggressive act, where he would strike again once they were 18. Not to mention all the times he mentions using them for his own gain in The War with the Left. Jesus, I don't think I've seen a man more perpetually stuck in his 2016 anti-SJW phase than Anton. In late March of 2021, he would commission Butch Hartman to draw his character Mr. Freaks holding up a white flag that was burning. The version he publicly posted though showed the transgender flag, not a white one. It turns out Anton colored in the white flag with transgender colors to make it seem like Hartman drew something hateful as an April Fool's joke. Hartman already doesn't have a good reputation online and has done some shady things, but many agreed that slandering him like this, even for a joke, was going a little too far. In 2022, he would make a huge video cataloging all of the drama he'd gotten into over the years, and try to debunk the claims made by multiple commentary channels. Two of those channels being Just Stop and Harley TBS, where it should be noted that Anton drew them with their pants down getting spanked, both of whom were around 17. Yet again, not a good look. Even if his intentions were not sexual and more for comedic relief like he claims in the video.
As you can clearly see, the pants fall off in one shot, but they're back in the next one when spanking begins, which means Just Stop has clearly missed the point of the gag, or at least pretended that he missed it. A creepy type setup of a situation like this, but leads to good old-fashioned child discipline instead, doesn't mean anything sexual at all, not to mention it's a cartoon avatar, with freaking 4 fingers instead of 5, and I'm honestly surprised that Just Stop lost his marbles when he saw it.
This thing is over 2 hours long, by the way, and goes into detail about everything that's happened since 2020. I've watched most of it, and I'll admit, there are a lot of good points he makes about his detractors and whatnot, but there's also a lot of really bad faith misinterpretations and illogical arguments that many people, including myself, don't agree with. I can't name them all and dissect this for time reasons, but there's a lot of people who have talked about it online. I'm also 90% sure he frantically searches up his name online almost every day because he found my video and said this on Twitter, even though, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is sorted from most known entries to lesser known ones. You're probably watching this right now, actually. Hi, Anton. Maybe you should spend more time focusing on your job and not getting into beef with teenagers on the internet as a 36-year-old man. James Bear, also known as Doodle Jam, was an animator and YouTuber well known for his short comedic animations, starring usually himself and his ex Clarissa. James created his account back in 2013, but it would take him a full year to upload his first few animations. those animations being a heavily inspired series called Jamworld, and by heavily inspired, I mean it's almost identical to Eddsworld. Eventually, he'd move on to regular parodies and animations for YouTubers like Pyrocynical for a while. He wouldn't get his big break until around 2019 when the No Nut November trend was in full swing. Most of these starred Clarissa in very revealing clothing, which is probably the reason for the boost in fame. Noticing this, James decided to double down on sexualizing Clarissa in every animation, which propelled him into even higher amounts of fame. On the surface, everything seemed okay, but James would not be in this video if the story ended here. Aaron Preston is the author of a 182-page document called The Truth Behind James Bear, detailing messages that James had sent to him and a huge confession that he made. In February of 2016, James confessed to Aaron that in 2013, he essayed his own sister who was 9 years old at the time. What makes things worse is that he kept doing this to her for years, only stopping around 2016. James at the time was a teenager, so he very much knew what he was doing was deplorable, but it didn't stop him. He blames what he did on depression and tries to garner sympathy from Aaron, like he's the victim in this whole thing. I'm gonna be honest, besides this very important piece of information, the rest of the document is an absolute train wreck. It's filled with nonsensical ramblings and petty grievances that don't matter. Like, there's a section where he calls out James for his big hand and demon fetish. Unfortunately, because of how much bullshit there is in this document, it flew under the radar when it was published back in July of 2018. Someone actually sent this document to me when it was published back then, and I can't believe it took until 2022 for people to realize what he'd done. In March of 2022, the user Lalo Does Art exposed James and the document to a large audience of people, which got the ball rolling for more people to find out about what he did. James's earlier response was also found, which was made back in 2020. If you're wondering, it's complete horseshit. He lies and says it only happened once, which directly contradicts what he told Aaron in private. He also says it was okay because he was a minor at the time and it was consensual.
Whatever I said in the leaked messages was fabricated, and I knew that this person would leak these messages one day with bad intentions. However, as much as I don't want to talk about my past, what happened back then was an isolated issue. It only happened once when I was a minor. It was already dealt with. Those who are involved are fine and made amends. I am not a threat to anyone, and the other claims are not true. This situation is old news, and despite what you think about all of this, no one has any right to judge my past.
This was picked apart by dozens of commentary YouTubers and destroyed his reputation online. He would make several responses on Twitter and YouTube, all of them filled with lies, contradictions, downplaying the situation, acting as the victim, etc. Even he would realize how bad they all were and deleted most of them. In September of 2023, James's alleged sister would come forward with her side of the story. Not only did James lie about everything in his responses, but he also lied in his confession. It's even worse than what he described. She alleges that he essayed her from 2013 all the way up until 2020. That is 7 full years of abuse and assault against his little sister. The backlash would cause James to spiral out of control and lose his mind. Not helping was the fact that Clarissa had obviously dumped him by this point. In February of 2024, a post would be made calling out James for harassing his now ex Clarissa and many of her friends out of jealousy and spite because she broke up with him. In the Aaron Preston document, you can see that the way James communicates is very creepy, childish, and petty. Nothing has changed since then, as the messages James was sending to Clarissa and her friends were downright stalker-like and deranged. He'd make multiple accounts to harass her after getting blocked, try to reach her through her friends that were sick of his bullshit, and he'd make up scenarios in his head to accuse people of in DMs. Those made up scenarios being that Clarissa was cheating on him with almost everyone she was friends with, and that she abused him. You can see this in many drawings he made where he depicts Clarissa as a cheating, emotionally abusive, and terrible person, while he's a caring, loving boyfriend that gets stomped on for no reason. These images are genuinely psychotic, by the way. This is followed by an account he definitely made that pretended to be Clarissa and talked about how much she loved cheating on James, exposing DMs between Clarissa and another person. His mind has been so rotted by porn that he constantly refers to himself as getting NTR'd, making dozens of posts like this. This is not the only account, by the way. There's another one that frantically tries to defend James. Another response would be made on July 8th of 2024, this time featuring his sister. Let me tell you, this one is really distressing. His sister sounds like she's being held at gunpoint to read a pre-made script defending James and saying she lied about everything for money.
This is Alicia speaking, or in other words, this is his sister speaking, and what my brother James is saying is true. First, I would like to give my deepest apology to everyone for spreading misinformation about my brother and about my own family. Truth be told, that I only came forward because I was only upset and my reasons for being upset were petty and I had a falling out with a friend. People who claimed they had their best interests never really cared, which resulted in me giving them very personal information and having the police come over to our family's house yet again. My actions were completely reckless and I didn't mean to put my family in danger like that. For years, I was always aware about the drama online towards my brother, and admittedly, I knew from the beginning that he was innocent, and unfortunately, I adopted this false history that the internet made about us, and it felt like I had more to gain by simply accepting it.
Pretty much everyone doubts this was genuine, as it makes no sense for her to go back on all the accusations unless James was threatening her, which it sounds like he is. Allegedly, James's family relies on the ad revenue from his channel for income, so it's likely that her whole family was complicit in the abuse and silenced her story for James's YouTube career. On July 18th, James would make another response on Twitter with a massive thread trying to debunk everything. It starts off by disproving the claims of using an AI-generated clone of his sister's voice, and her allegedly using donation funds to get a new PC. However, now he's claiming that the assault never even happened in the first place, and downplays it as awkward cuddling. He ends the thread saying he's moving on and wants to leave behind this drama, never being heard from since. This guy is genuinely one of the most deplorable and disgusting YouTubers I've ever had the displeasure of enjoying at one point in my life. I'm honestly surprised most people don't know about him or what he did, because this is genuinely awful. I hope his sister can one day leave this horrible family and find peace. There's many more details and incidents that you can find in this video made by the YouTuber Salty. Shmorky, also known as Dave Kelly, was a prominent animator for the Something Awful forums, and frequent collaborator with major networks like Adult Swim. Dave's early life was pretty awful. After graduating college in 2000, they struggled to find work as an animator and were abused by the people they had to live with for years. They did commission work for a while and made some short comedic animations for the website somethingawful.com. In 2004, a convention for Something Awful users would be created called GoonCon 2004. The past was truly a different time. The owner of the site, Richard Lotex Kianka, would finally get to meet Dave, being a huge fan of their work. This is where Dave would be given the opportunity to work for Something Awful as a full-time animator, and they soon became close friends. In 2008, Dave would create a Smurfs knockoff called Clurfs, which would represent themselves and be a staple in their comics and work for a long time. Unfortunately, Something Awful wasn't doing great for relevancy online, as YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter were kicking ass in numbers and growth. Around 2013 is where Richard and Dave decided to create a YouTube channel called Gaming Garbage, similar to the premise of AVGN. Things went well for a while actually. While the YouTube channel was doing okay in numbers, Dave was getting commissioned by networks like Adult Swim and allegedly even Nickelodeon at some point. Yes, they're the animator behind this bumper you might have seen floating around, as well as many others. 2016 is where things would ultimately crash and burn for Dave, as within the span of a few months, there would be dozens of controversies coming their way. First and foremost, Dave was revealed to be an abuser and overall shitty partner to their girlfriend Amanda. Amanda was diagnosed with schizoaffective and bipolar disorder, in which she would need medication to function properly. In a 9-minute video you can find on YouTube, Dave secretly records audio of Amanda freaking out, yelling, screaming, ranting, and crying.
I'll just do what you want. What do you want me to do? I'll do whatever you want. What do you want from me?
Stop screaming and pretending.
I'm not pretending.
I'm...
What do you want from me? What?
What do you want from me?
With that in context, it turns out Dave hid her medication and forced her to stop taking them, essentially coaxing her into a mental breakdown that they recorded and posted online for sympathy. If you're wondering why Dave sounds like that, by the way, it's because they started really getting into gender identity and wanted a more androgynous presenting character. This includes a wig, makeup, and strange nasally voice they're putting on. I don't think this really matters in the grand scheme of things, I just want to explain why they look and sound different. Around this time, they were also kicked off of Gaming Garbage after a falling out with Richard, also being banned from Something Awful for that recording that they posted. After breaking up some time later, Amanda would provide the website Kiwi Farms with a lot of information regarding Dave's private life. Dave, to the surprise of nobody, was into urine, scat, and diapers. Rumors about this had circulated for years now, but this was the confirmation. Even revealing that they wanted Amanda to change their full diaper while being spoken to like a baby, on top of being confirmed to be a manipulator, abuser, and awful person in general. Worst of all though, a user named Carefully would reveal dozens of pages of chat logs between them and Dave from 2014. These chat logs were incredibly sexual RP that included incest, scat, urine, diapers, and anything else you can imagine. Thankfully, it seems like Carefully was over 18 during these messages, but my god, some of these are really hard to read. Especially since Dave loves pretending to be a child during most of the RP. Another person then joined in on this called Soliloqueef. They revealed that Dave tried to hire them as a voice actor in 2007, but the lines that Dave wanted them to read involved pretending to be an underage girl who was really into scat, urine, and diapers. Now you might be asking what these line reads were for. Well, this part gets crazy. Soliloqueef's lines were meant to be used on an account called Peaches the Puppy on Fur Affinity. Not only that, but it turns out the Peaches the Puppy account was also connected to another one called Sandy Pants, who seemed to be an underage girl coincidentally also into scat, urine, and diapers. He was pretending to be an underage girl who was into these fetishes on 2 separate accounts, going as far as to hire voice actors to play into this weird roleplay fantasy. After the uproar this caused on Kiwi Farms, Dave left one final comic on their Tumblr, checked into a loony bin, and hasn't been heard from in over 7 years. Since then, many have theorized that Dave went under a new name, that name being Stone Toss. Obviously not true with the recent information, but a fun theory for the time. Since then, Amanda seems to be doing okay and looks back on this era with amusement, although sadly, Richard Lotex Kianka would commit suicide on November 9th, 2021. A sad ending to an already tragic story. Most of the information I learned came from this video by Magic Mush, by the way. Watch it for more details. So that's the story as many people know it. However, as I did further research, I found a Tumblr blog claiming to debunk some major allegations against Dave. I'm gonna read some of the excerpts and summarize the main points. To recap what's going on one more time, sometime shortly before the New Year's, it was claimed that Shmorky supposedly had been having sexual chats with a 16-year-old on Skype, who came forward under the username Carefully on Kiwi Farms. These interactions involved diaper scat roleplay, and shortly after these claims were made, Shmorky attempted suicide. On January 2nd, Carefully released Skype logs on Kiwi Farms, and Shmorky's ex-fiancée Amanda also began to make accusations against him, ranging from his psychological abuse of her to him having alternate personas online. He attempted suicide again on the 6th. The main accusation is that Shmorky was involved in leaked sexual roleplay with a minor. This has already been denied by Carefully herself. The problem is, she waited over a week and a half before making this clear, long after the story had made its way around, and most people were already under the impression that she was 16 at the time when she added him on Skype. She was not. Amanda has said a lot of things, going from saying Shmorky's room is covered in piss-soaked diapers, to claiming his boss Lotax rapes his own kids. If I were to go through every single contradiction she's made, this post would be even more stupidly long than it already is. So we'll focus on the more serious ones. Amanda claims that Shmorky prevented her from taking the medication she needed to cope with her schizophrenia. Lotax has already backed her up on this, saying that Shmorky for whatever reason was anti-medicine and anti-therapy. It's apparent from the logs that Amanda wasn't as unstable in the past as she is now, and the fact that he would repeatedly turn the cops away from dealing with her is an obvious sign of an abusive relationship. From the Skype conversations that she leaked herself, it's very clear that Shmorky was not in the slightest anti-medicine or anti-therapy. It's also pretty well known that Amanda was paranoid about continuing to take her medication on her own. This is me now cutting in, by the way. I gotta be honest, just because Dave says they're not anti-medication or anti-therapy in some Skype chat logs, it doesn't necessarily mean it's definitive proof that they're innocent in this case. It's very easy to just say one thing and not actually mean it with your actions. However, it is also totally possible that Amanda misplaced the medication or something, and believed that Dave hid them from her in a state of paranoia and delusion. It's been made clear that she makes a lot of baseless and insane accusations sometimes because of her condition. So in general, I guess I'd say take this one with a grain of salt. The third claim is that according to Amanda, Shmorky has 2 alternate personas, Sandy Pants and Peaches the Puppy. Another user on Kiwi Farms with the username Soliloqueef claims to have proof that Shmorky asked her to do voice work for Peaches the Puppy back in 2007, so that he could post it on the Peaches the Puppy for Affinity, thus disguising himself with a more feminine voice. This one is kind of weird, but it's still something Lotax seems to agree with. A mod on Kiwi Farms who knew a friend of Sandy Pants attempted to contact them, and their friend's testimony cast doubt on the idea of Shmorky being her. There's also the fact that Sandy Pants posted a statement on her Ink Bunny sometime around the 10th of January, at a point where Shmorky was still being held for a second attempted suicide 4 days earlier, and would have had to have known about these allegations being made against him on some random Kiwi Farms forum. That's also assuming that while he was being held, he had access to unmonitored internet in the first place. So Shmorky and some other adult had diaper RP. Then the other person leaked the Skype log and acted like she was underage at the time. She waited a week before she said she wasn't. Some more comments on her Skype also implied that she might have been dishonest as to how old she was in the past. Shmorky's ex-fiancée says that Shmorky was an aggressive abuser, but then releases chat logs that completely contradict a majority of her claims. Also, some stuff about Sandy Pants happened that doesn't really have much relevance, other than that it would possibly point to foul play on Amanda and Carefully's parts. That's about it. This definitely gives me a new perspective on this whole situation, and I'm really surprised a lot of people don't talk about it. From what I'm seeing, there's a good amount of proof towards Dave's innocence, but like I said, some of this evidence is very circumstantial and shaky. I'm not entirely sure how to feel about this, given that the damage is done and this whole thing is very old. James William Barkley III, also known as Animated James, was an artist, animator, voice actor, and musician, mostly known for his parodies and original series he created on his YouTube channel. James got his start on Newgrounds in 2008, most of his animations involving Sonic and then eventually MLP, because of course they did. Almost every animator and artist around this time seemed to really be into either Sonic, MLP, or both. These videos were honestly very impressive and well animated for a teenager. James had an immense amount of talent when it came to almost anything creative. That showed in his numbers. These videos got tons of views, which made him start a YouTube channel in 2011. During this era, we saw huge projects like Seniors and C Students, which were some of my favorite animations by him. Although, there was a certain incident in 2014, which caused a lot of mental health problems for him and was most likely the catalyst for what happens next. In May of 2014, someone on 4chan linked a Tumblr page called Sonic Girls, which contained webcomics of girls from the Sonic series, farting and defecating, sometimes on each other. Immediately, somebody clocked this art style as being very similar to Animated James. When confronted, he vehemently denied the allegations. And then mysteriously, the Tumblr page was deleted right after. From this very poor move, there was no denying it. Animated James had a fart fetish. This caused great bouts of depression as he was mocked and made fun of all over the internet for this. Even Zach Hadel of Psychic Pebbles fame and Spaz Kid got in a Skype call with him, only to make fart noises and ask if it turned him on. Because of this incident, James would have massive trust issues, and became very standoffish. The mockery he received for this really affected him, and it caused a huge shift in who he was as a person. Now, like I said in the first video, I think having fetishes like this is fine, as long as you're not hurting anyone. And as funny and embarrassing as this might have been, I think he deserves to be called out for more of the serious allegations against him, which I'm going to talk about now. Also in 2014, he began dating an artist named Toxic Soul 77 online, also known as Michaela Groves. The problem being, James was around 20, while Michaela was only 17. Many accused him of grooming and which was amplified even more when James tried to justify it by quoting the age of consent laws in New York where he lived. They would eventually break up near the end of 2015 because of the accusations against him. Funnily enough, James Bear, who I talked about earlier, tried going after Michaela after this happened, obviously getting rejected. Thank God. Despite this, his fame got him invited to several conventions in the mid-2010s, most of which being MLP related. Although his behavior at BronyCon 2015 would cause some controversy and scrutiny under his name. James, for some reason, decided to heckle other guest speakers at a panel because to him they weren't funny enough.
To leave a panel hosted by someone who I consider to be a close friend. So what I do is I yell out, "We're not friends anymore," and then I walk out.
And also made essay jokes directly to the face of an acquaintance, ripping on their artwork as well. When this person got mad at them and called him out on Twitter, James at first went, "Heh, ever heard of a thing called dark humor, libtard? Before making a proper apology. Those guest speakers would later call him out for the heckling, causing even more controversy. After some time, James made a video calling out the brony community for being easily butthurt and not being able to take jokes or criticism. Hearing the news about James's behavior, BronyCon banned him from speaking at any more events. While he wasn't banned from outright attending, this did cause a rift between the brony community and himself, now having a reputation for being a huge dick. Going into the second half of the 2010s, James's mental health would continue to spiral. He publicly revealed that at this time he was going through severe depression and social anxiety, which greatly affected his motivation to do YouTube. That's when he dropped arguably the greatest animation he's ever made, and my personal favorite, Creative Types. Despite what he did, I really love this animation. The song is amazing, everything is so polished and nice looking, the storyline is great, I just think it's his best work. His audience and even the people who mocked him agreed. It garnered universal praise and got him back into the swing of things on YouTube. Although, after a few more animations, this wouldn't last long. On July 16th, 2018, James would release his final video, which announced the discontinuing of the channel and quitting the internet to focus on his mental health. He reasoned that making videos and focusing on animation gave him no time to fix his problems on the inside, causing a lot of drama which I mentioned before. James then left the internet with no trace. About a year later, on August 19th, 2019, the voice actress for Penny from C Students made a statement. She had left C Students because James had wanted her to do a lot of sexually explicit material that she wasn't comfortable with for the show. Not only that, but James actively pursued her romantically and even offered to fly out to where she lived. She was also 17, and James, according to the timeline, was already dating Michaela. So that's 2 minors he was lusting over at the same time. When she left the show, James became so angry that he allegedly encouraged his fanbase to harass her. 4 years later, James would actually return after going silent. He acknowledges that he deserved all the criticism that went his way back then, especially him dating a 17-year-old at 20. All the burned bridges, ruined relationships, bad behavior, and being mocked were all his fault according to him. In a Daft Pina interview later that year, he revealed that he went homeless in 2020, making it his lowest point both physically and mentally.
I became homeless right around the start of the COVID pandemic when everyone is supposed to be in their homes as much as possible. So that sort of gave me this perspective of, I guess this is how I go. Like, I guess this is just it. While I did have sort of a dismal outlook in that regard, being homeless definitely helped me put my priorities in order. And like, despite it being the most difficult external time in my life, internally, I was a lot more at peace. I was a lot more just accepting of who I am, who I was, and just everything about me. So while it was difficult, I don't think it was anything that I don't deserve. I definitely believe that I got everything I had coming to me in that regard.
Thankfully, he managed to recover because of the people around him, planning on going to therapy and taking medication. Surprisingly, he's still active under a new name, drawing NSFW commissions and doing what he feels like. He says he's not asking for forgiveness and understands if people still hate him. He just wants to move past his old persona and move on to doing what he wants. Despite this, there is a conspiracy theory surrounding an account named Neurotic. This channel popped up right after James retired, and one of these videos has a very distinct animated James style. Their final tweet also makes it seem like James was trying to make animations under a new name, before deciding it wasn't a good idea. It's still unconfirmed if this was really James or not, but a lot of people seem to think it is. You know, as much as I loved James's content back then and want to forgive him for his past grievances, him dating and lusting after 2 minors is where I draw the line. I do hope he's going to be alright mentally, but I cannot support him at all in good faith. Yet again, more details can be found in this Turkey Tom video. Danny, also known as Lord Bung, was an animator and artist who created an immensely popular original series on YouTube based on the SCP Foundation. If you don't know what the SCP Foundation is, it's a fictional wiki-based collaborative writing project where people write entries and stories about things like anomalies, entities, and objects. It's very popular online, and even inspired some books and video games. Around 2016 is where Danny would start their online career with a series called Bung Chronicles. These were actually more akin to animated rant/commentary videos, discussing topics like vaccines, crystals, and astrology in the form of debunking. It's actually extremely impressive how long and well written these videos are, feeling like a network-produced TV show instead of one person creating it. Danny had already showed the internet that they had a lot of talent to create high-quality productions, and that showed in their next series called Confinement in 2017. Confinement was an SCP-based black comedy about Connor, who was locked in the Foundation under D-Class and used for human experiments, given that he had the power of instantly coming back to life after dying. This series was massive, garnering millions of views per episode, and receiving unanimous praise from not only the SCP community, but also the general public. It was so good that people who had never even heard of SCP stuff actually checked it out after watching, including me. Sadly, because of copyrighted music, Danny couldn't keep any of the ad revenue made from these early episodes, a lot of it going to record labels instead, because God knows they need the money. Despite the financial hurdle, Danny managed to make 4 episodes within a short time frame of a few months. Around this time is when the Confinement Patreon was getting traction too, which made sense given how long animation takes and how many people were willing to pay good money to fund this series. Things did eventually start to slow down, but the animation was getting much better and more elaborate, justifying the extra time between episodes. The last full and finished Confinement episode was released in 2019. Arguably the peak of their career, with the Patreon allegedly in the thousands. Although tragedy seemed to strike when Danny fell down the stairs and broke their tailbone. This meant that working on the series would take a backseat so they could eventually get better and be able to sit down without pain. This is important later on, I swear. Behind the scenes, they collaborated with and made a ton of friends online, who even have some cameos in videos. I actually mentioned their entire friend group in the last video with Squizzy, but this time we're going to talk about Quite. So Danny had hired people at this point to work on the show to get it out faster, which is great news. Although around 2021 is when they would start dating a co-writer named Orion. Usually, dating your coworkers doesn't end well, and it certainly didn't for Danny. On February 22nd of 2023, Orion made a twitlonger calling out the YouTuber quite for many things, one of the most serious being essay and abuse. In the weeks following the call-out post, Danny would write on Instagram that they fully trusted Orion and what they were saying about Quite was 100% true. Quite later made a response, and it turns out Orion had falsely accused Quite of this serious crime. For some reason. I don't remember if a motive ever came to light, but from what I've seen, it looks like they were still bitter after a falling out they had in 2018. But yes, Quite had receipts and managed to debunk these allegations in a video you can find on their channel. Just like Fizzy Pop and the Slazo accusations, Orion deactivated their account shortly after and vanished from the internet. The heat was now on Danny, who publicly was in support of someone who falsely accused another of SA. Well, it was silent for a while until June, where Danny made the decision to stop the Patreon outright and delete their presence on the internet, which included their 1 million subscriber YouTube channel. This sadly meant the discontinuing of Confinement as a series. Wait, hold on. The Patreon content got leaked. Holy shit, it's episode 8. Let's watch, everybody. That's it? That's the lost episode? That was just a bunch of cheap sex scenes!
What a rip!
Lord Bung betrayed us! Yup, most of what was being worked on for episode 8 was this weird, almost fetish-like softcore porn of Connor being naked and accidentally slipping around while having sex with people. That's all there was since the last full episode in 2019. There has to be a name for this kink because it's animated in a very specific way that's meant to probably get themselves off. In fact, many have pointed out that the sex scenes seem to be animated by Orion themselves. This only added fuel to the fire as Danny was seen as not only in support of a deceiver, but also a scammer. Again, nothing wrong with having weird kinks and fetishes, but using Patreon money for this, instead of doing your damn job, is pretty scummy. And just as they promised, Lord Bung was erased from the internet and only exists in archives you can find online. This is where the injury comes in. You see, many people believe in a certain timeline of unfortunate events happening, leading to the downfall of their career. When Danny broke their tailbone in 2019, they began using Patreon funds to buy weed and other sedatives to ease the pain. Danny made this a habit, even after their tailbone should have healed, which is approximately 8 to 12 weeks. Orion later came into the picture and began writing, in which they would shoehorn in their self-insert OC, who would of course fall in love with Connor and they'd get together, tanking the writing in the process. Orion would then manipulate and lie to Danny about the Quite allegations, and given that they were dating, Danny would blindly take their side. Can't really fault them for trusting their partner initially, to be fair, but it's still unfortunate. Orion and Danny would f*** around for a few years, smoking weed and animating this, while nothing worthwhile was actually being produced, until it all came crashing down. Danny has not been seen since this incident, Confinement fans are still angry, and most of this was cataloged by Mr. Sumerian, so thank you to him. Actually, as I was researching, I stumbled upon another conspiracy similar to Animated James. There's an NSFW account on Twitter called SamRockwell420 that just so happens to share a very similar art style to Orion's. In fact, there's a thread on Reddit with multiple people who are extremely confident that this account is Orion. You can take a look for yourself, but be mindful nothing is confirmed. Also, this goes without saying, but do not harass this person. Even if they do end up being Orion, they don't deserve this, and I don't want to be responsible for anything that could happen. Tom Preston, aka Andrew Dobson, was a webcomic artist mainly known for the series So, You're a Cartoonist, among many other controversies and incidents that he's had in the past 15 years. Tom from an early age seemed to always have a huge interest in Nintendo and drawing cartoons, so much so that he was bullied for it, which apparently was so awful that he deliberately chose to go to college in Minnesota of all places to get away from his bully. You can see how people can really get under Tom's skin with a little teasing, because he held a grudge against his high school bully for 7 years. Although bullying is a bit of a strong word to use in this context, because from what he describes, this bully just made fun of him here and there and mocked him back in high school. That's it. Obviously, I don't condone bullying, but it seems like a huge overreaction to move across state lines just to get away from one guy who made fun of you as a teenager. And from the post that Tom made, it looks like the guy wanted to add Tom on MySpace to maybe make amends and apologize for ragging on him back then. But according to Tom, it fills me with such anger that he of all people, would think that everything he did to me was moot, and he would try to make up with me. Tom attended the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, in which he would yet again get made fun of by people because he wore a fedora every day to class to hide his balding head. Surprisingly, he didn't flee the country because of this, and went on to graduate with a bachelor's in fine arts. Although he ended up learning nothing from those 4 years because of his inflated ego and inability to take criticism. This shows in his stagnant art style, which hasn't improved since he created his DeviantArt in 2004. Reminds me of someone. Tim Buckley. For his early days on the internet, he'd make a living by drawing inflation porn, going under the pseudonym Caddy N, hosting all the inflation-related work on his own website, which included inflation flash games. Yes, this is real. Eventually, he'd get bored of drawing fetish content and move on to posting random artworks here and there throughout the mid to late 2000s. This brings us to 2009, where Tom made a webcomic, as mentioned before, most of which involves strawman arguments. If you want your opinion to look good, make sure to depict the person who doesn't agree with you as moronic, jealous, angry, gross, and an unlikable caricature. That way, people can see you as the stoic and reasonable genius that you truly are. Tom did this a lot, especially when glazing Nintendo, which he did often. When people rightfully criticize these comics for their flawed arguments and lack of, well, being good, Tom decided to go on paragraphs-long rants about how he doesn't need to change, and any critique against him is stupid and nobody cares. He's also a massive hypocrite. You see, Tom is very inspired by and loves 90s anime, which is presumably what he grew up on and based his art style off of. Keyword though, 90s anime. For a really bizarre reason, he also hates anime. More specifically, anime from the 2000s and onwards. Now in 2002, a movie called Treasure Planet was released by Disney, and unfortunately, it bombed really hard at the box office, costing many people their jobs. This pushed Disney to use more 3D animation, which was much more successful. And now you know why you've never seen anything 2D animated in theaters ever again. Tom's dream was to work at Disney, and he'd spent a lot of time getting his degree so he could become a 2D animator. But now those dreams were gone. What does this have to do with anime? Well, Tom got the idea in his head that Treasure Planet was inspired by anime of the time, and that's why it bombed so hard. So essentially, he blames 2000s anime, which he thinks inspired Treasure Planet, which lost Disney so much money, it cost him his non-existent career. There are many other controversies to list. His fetishization of lesbians, calling people horrible things for disagreeing with them, sending this image to the daughter of Robin Williams right when he passed away, the water bottle incident, etc. But I want to talk about arguably his most famous and funniest controversy that he had in the mid-2010s. This is the Power Girl comic. It features a creepy guy taking photos of a cosplayer without her permission, until Tom heroically saves the day by beating the creep with a baseball bat. The only problem is, none of this actually happened. You see, it turns out the guy doing the photography was the cosplayer's boyfriend, and judging by the photos, she seems very okay with it. Tom can be seen in the background with his iconic fedora, fantasizing about saving this woman from nothing, which inspired this make-believe comic. Tom would continue the same old shtick of arguing with people online and sending death threats to politicians, until eventually he wiped his internet presence mysteriously in 2020. Allegedly, the reason for this was because of his family forcing him to stop using the internet. Tom's brother was in line to receive a very prestigious and important government job, until Tom ruined it because of his online behavior, and the mere association with Tom made his brother lose that opportunity. Again, this is all alleged because it's very hard to verify this claim online. Tom hasn't returned to the internet since, and it's doubtful that he ever will. I also want to thank Magic Mush yet again for the video on this topic, in which I gathered most of my information from.
Hey, paisano!
Oh my god, Mario, Luigi, Princess, Toad!
Who did you expect? Foxbox Ray?
Steve Cutts is a British animator whose work focuses on satirization of modern culture and society. Most of his major projects involve activism in one way, shape, or form. This ranges from things like environmentalism, corruption, greed, and the topic I'm going to focus on, smartphone addiction. In October of 2016, the band Moby hired Steve to make an animated music video for their song, Are You Lost in the World Like Me?, after seeing his previous work Man in 2012. The music video is, pretty bad on all counts. I guess the message behind it is okay, but it's presented in such a dumb and pretentious way, it's hard to take seriously. The animation is trying to go for that 1930s Fleischer style, yet none of this era's techniques or movements is present in this video. You know who did do a good job at recreating this style authentically and making it look good? Studio MDHR when they made Cuphead. They knew what they were doing, unlike this. I love the part where this guy just randomly kicks a puppy for no reason. Like, why did he do that? There's also this really weird section about a minute in where he sees a woman getting harassed on the subway, but he chooses to do nothing about it solely because he won't get praise from everyone else. You know why? Because they're all staring at their cell phones. Man, I hate that people addicted to their smartphones prevents me from helping people for no ulterior motives. And God forbid a person wanting to be with someone they find attractive. You know when your parents or grandparents would always say things like, kids these days are all addicted to their smartphones and don't go outside. Well, imagine that phrase but turned into an animation and you get this. Whoa man, this is really fucking deep. Did you know that they call them cell phones? Because we're all prisoners to them? Society is so fucking messed up, man. Why can't everybody just read books? They're so much better because, well, they just are, okay? Puppychan, also known as Autumn, was an online artist known mostly for their drawings of anthropomorphic animals and suggestive furry characters which were immensely popular in the late 2010s. Autumn joined Twitter at the ripe age of 13 in 2016, already doomed from the start. Like many other artists on this list, they were bullied as a child and took refuge and support from strangers on the internet, who would validate Autumn by supporting their art career. The drawings posted were actually really well made for their age. It was something unique and polished, not seen much online, gaining them a massive fanbase who wanted even more. Their art actually becomes a point of contention later on in this segment, which I'll eventually get to. The bigger fanbase unfortunately meant more addiction to the validation that they were receiving, with many tweets fishing for attention and wanting compliments. Similar to Fallen Chungus in the last video I made, Autumn was very clearly addicted to Twitter, which would escalate as their mother, who is a Jehovah's Witness, tried to get them off the internet. This didn't work obviously, and Autumn began to really overshare about everything going on in their life, even personal mental health struggles such as age regression and suicidal thoughts, which they would use as a shield or even as ammunition later on. Not to mention their art style progressively getting more suggestive over time. Bigger boobs, bigger thighs, and a slim waist to attract all the gooners. They did this for every character in OC they drew, which was not a good thing because their fanbase was composed of a lot of minors who were being exposed to this. This escalation continued as they made a private account discussing their kinks and fetishes. In June of 2020, an anonymous Twitter account was created to call out Autumn for the suggestive artworks being exposed to minors, among other things. Autumn called for the mass reporting of that account, and then made a tweet threatening to commit suicide over it. Autumn would get into an argument with the accuser in private DMs, and then unironically use the "I'm mentally ill and a minor" excuse for any form of criticism with how they handle their platform. After this incident happened, Antoons would step into the picture, but I've already talked about that, so I'm not going to go over it. Once they turned 18 in 2020, they went full NSFW on a separate pre-existing account, and flipped to hating minors and wanting nothing to do with them. Although Autumn made zero effort to actually discourage minors from following them, or taking precautions to brand themselves as someone who is adult only. This stuff is really important because of laws and social compliance when it comes to minors following suggestive/NSFW accounts. Autumn made an apology for doing this after getting called out, but then made another post about suicide and then deactivated. Autumn came back later and tried to rebrand to no avail. Making things worse was that their girlfriend Hazel was caught pressuring minors into their polycule, in which the whole thing just collapsed. Autumn made another suicide attempt trying to overdose on pills, yet thankfully they were saved by paramedics and hospitalized. Soon they'd be placed into a psych ward and then returned in early 2021. Despite everything that happened, Autumn continued to grow their fanbase, which was really not good for their mental health. In a thread on Autumn's private account, they would go into detail about how they were a martyr and that angels and demons were real and possessing them. They would also reveal their struggles with food, which turned out to be diabetes. Things would continue as usual, where they would make inflammatory statements, not take any criticism, and use their mental health as a shield from rightfully getting called out. However, in November of 2021, Autumn would make their biggest hit, which was Gothfield, a goth femme version of Garfield. This blew up almost instantly, and many other artists were inspired to draw the character in their own way. This got so big in fact that people eventually forgot about the origins of Gothfield, and Autumn stopped getting credit for it. This made them very angry, as they sent their fans to tell artists drawing the character to credit Autumn. They'd also go on their private account and rant about how bigger artists were assholes for ignoring them, which just kinda reeks of entitlement and jealousy. Yet again, as the months went on, it was more suicidal tweets, more fights with random people, and more terrible suggestive art. This would spiral into manic tweets on their private accounts about God, the Antichrist, and threatening to commit suicide via ingesting blueberries, which apparently they were allergic to. Obviously, this didn't work, and they began overdosing on pills again, which also didn't work. Autumn blamed this on their other personalities, alluding to having DID. But at this point, people were sick of their behavior, which hadn't changed for years. Autumn then decided to go full NSFW on their main account and posted very lewd images of their characters, which were interacted with by a lot of minors. Speaking of minors, Autumn confessed on their private account that they were interacting with a minor that was getting really suggestive and lewd with them. The minor had been called out before for drawing NSFW at the age of 15 and was asking Autumn to retweet their stuff. Despite saying that they were going to stop interacting with them, Autumn lied and kept doing it, even retweeting and interacting with their NSFW work. This was the final straw, as a vast majority of people called them out for grooming. Even their diehard fans were not okay with what happened. DMs would also leak of Autumn even encouraging the minor to post NSFW on a private account, instead of doing the responsible thing and telling them to stop drawing it altogether. The backlash was so strong that Autumn deactivated their account for good. Until all of a sudden, this account called Kung Fu Revy popped up. This account was presumably run by an Asian person who didn't speak a lot of English. Except it wasn't. It was Autumn yet again trying to rebrand. Now they were being called a racist after getting exposed, and ranted about it on their private accounts before disappearing for a while. Autumn actually didn't leave the internet for good. In a video about art degradation made by Daft Pina, Autumn, now going by Salem, comments on it and reflects on their past as Puppychan. They're still around and post on Tumblr as WolfTinger666. From what I've seen, they seem to be doing good, and their art has improved drastically since the Puppychan Gooterbait days. Once again, if you want more details, check out the video by Turkey Tom. If you are a successful artist online, ranging from the early to late 2010s, especially on sites like Tumblr and DeviantArt, you've probably heard the legend of the Wonder Bread guy. He was a mysterious, anonymous, and surprisingly wealthy commissioner who would spend thousands upon thousands of dollars commissioning very specific drawings from different artists. The drawings were of evil, blonde, and wealthy businesswomen at grocery stores, buying dozens of loaves of white Wonder Bread. If you haven't clocked it already, this is definitely a fetish. The person who was commissioning all these pieces went by the username Merlogic1 on DeviantArt and other sites. However, there's also a lesser known type of artwork he likes to commission. Sometimes, he prefers evil, blonde, and wealthy businesswomen tearing down forests and building sandwich factories, in a cartoonishly nefarious sort of way. Even Shadman was contacted by this guy in 2018 to do a commission, except for some reason, this was something Shad refused to draw. Yes, the same Shadman who drew CP and other horrible things, refused to do some tame fetish art that arguably isn't even that sexual. And this should be noted, according to him in the interview with the YouTuber Scumbagovich, he claims to have been completely unaware about all the horrible things Shadman had done or his reputation.
Before I even got to that point, I'm just a little young mer going around asking people for different commissions. I don't do background checks on any of the characters that I, ask for commissions because,
So let me stop you right there. One quick thing. I'm just curious how that's the case because Shadman is the type of guy where his reputation absolutely precedes him, and I would find it very difficult to approach him for art, not knowing anything about him,
Look, I know it sounds unbelievable, but I truly do believe that I am the commission equivalent of Forrest Gump, where I just run into people and I just ask them stuff, and then one thing leads to another.
It's up to you guys if you want to believe him, but for the sake of time, let's move on. So what caused this fetish? According to the interview, it all started with Season 2, Episode 30B of Dexter's Lab, called The Old Switcheroos, where Dexter and Dee Dee are punished by staying in opposite rooms. The sequence of Dexter's paranoia about Dee Dee breaking and destroying all his stuff really, impacted him, so to speak. And the concept of an evil blonde woman destroying forests and being cartoonishly evil came from Dr. Blight of Captain Planet. According to someone on 4chan who had a similar fetish, it's a power dynamic and corruption thing, which is honestly very common. Generally, a lot of people are into a cruel and dominating woman, although not to the degree of specificity that Merlogic's into. But how about the Wonder Bread? Again, according to the guy on 4chan with the same fetish, it's the idea of the woman destroying and polluting her body by eating copious amounts of processed foods. One of those foods being plain white Wonder Bread. Merlogic is actually still active on Twitter and other sites, often openly discussing this fetish and what cartoon characters check all the boxes. Make sure to go check out the video by Scumbagovich for more details, and an interview with Merlogic himself. On January 20th, 2015, America was given one of the most influential and popular musicals of recent memory, made by disgraced Puerto Rican and soprano star Lin-Manuel Miranda. That musical being Hamilton, about Alexander Hamilton and the founding of the United States, sung entirely with the influence of rap and hip-hop. Interestingly, they decided to cast virtually anyone of any background for the roles, not just strictly finding white actors. This meant that the portrayal of George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr, and the main subject of this entry, Thomas Jefferson, were all played by colored actors. And for some reason, Tumblr was especially fond of this musical. This would culminate into thousands of pieces of fan art, mind you, of the actors playing the historical figures, not so much the historical figures themselves. If you know anything about US history and that time period, then you probably understand why. But yes, Hamilton fan art was damn near everywhere, including a drawing created by the artist Umbroni, also known as Jay, on September 11th, 2017. This is the infamous Thomas Jefferson Miku binder image. It portrays Thomas Jefferson as a black, trans, bisexual, furry weeaboo recovering cokehead studying art education. This is one of 4 images actually, the others being of Alexander Hamilton, John Lawrence, and Philip Hamilton. All of them equally as bizarre and convoluted as the Thomas Jefferson one. If you're wondering about the Miku binder part, by the way, it refers to the trans part of the drawing, not like a school binder. You see, many trans men and non-binary people use what's called a binder, which you strap onto your torso, and it essentially flattens and hides the appearance of breasts, giving you a more androgynous or masculine look, depending on what you're going for. This binder specifically had a Hatsune Miku print on it, which is a famous Vocaloid software from 2007. Many people quickly had a problem with this image, given that Jay was making drawings of real people and giving them fictitious identities such as being gay, non-binary, colored, etc. Not to mention the fact that most of these guys were slave owners and have done some horrible things, so romanticizing them like this by giving them quirky personalities just kind of irked a lot of people. In fact, this is a major problem that many agreed the musical had as well. There is little to no mention of slavery, which was a big issue in debate even back then, besides a few cut songs that never made it to the actual production. And while the founding fathers did do a lot of impressive things like, founding a whole country, by all means, most of them were pretty bad people. And the musical doesn't really reflect that. So it's kind of understandable why Jay's perception of these guys would be skewed. Although, to be fair, I think the main theme and purpose was motivating people to make something from nothing and rising to the top with hard work and persistence, with the backdrop of the founding of the US. This is probably the reason why Jay and many other artists didn't see anything wrong with drawing them like this. Yes, other people also drew them like this, but Jay's was the one that went viral. I'm assuming they all got their historical knowledge of the Revolutionary War from Hamilton. The next day, she'd respond to the backlash by doubling down and promising to continue drawing this type of stuff.
As many of you know, my recent character sheet got a bunch of hate on Tumblr. I got accused of homosexual erasure. It's my blood, sweat, tears, and hard work. I will continue to post. Heart emoji.
Within the following weeks, specifically the Thomas Jefferson image was posted all throughout the internet to be mocked and made fun of. To be fair, this is a really funny image given the context that this is based on a founding father, and the "I met God, she's black" sweater is just the cherry on top for ridiculousness. This got so bad that Jay ended up leaving the internet and deleting her account on September 24th. Now, was this tone deaf and weird? Yeah. Was this also really funny? Yeah. But did she deserve this? No, I don't really think so. Jay seemed like a really young person at the time, so I think it's fair to say she made a dumb mistake and wants to move past the incident. In fact, on September 15th, 2019, she'd make another response reflecting on what happened and all the harassment she received because of it, deciding ultimately to leave the Hamilton fandom. And then immediately got into more trouble by drawing shipping art of Aaron Hansen and Dan Avidan of Game Grumps. In June of 2020, she deleted all of her social media and decided to take a long break from the internet. Side note, do you guys remember the Hamilton artist/animator Cryptid Worm? They went by Galactibun or Scribs back then, so maybe you might know that name. I mentioned this because it seems like Jay was heavily inspired by this person, because when I first saw this image back then, I legitimately thought for a while that Cryptid Worm had made it. If you're wondering what happened to them, by the way, it turns out they got harassed by a lot of people in that fandom and rebranded. And yes, as you can tell, I was also into Hamilton back then. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to conclude part 2 of this iceberg. My god, this might be the longest part in the series, given how much history and research I had to do for some of the people on here, but finally it's done. I would not have been able to do this without all the YouTubers mentioned throughout the video, who made some excellent documentaries. Huge shout out to them. Thank you so much for watching and supporting what I do. If you have any other artists and art you want me to talk about, leave it in the comments below. Good night, everyone.